Welcome. We are so delighted that you are here today for our second installment of Out on the Prairie with Larry. Today we'll be discovering a remnant prairie. I'm Tammy Thompson, Outreach and Conference Manager for Deep Roots, and I am delighted to be here with you again today. Share my screen. So many technical details. So before we introduce our speaker and our topic today, I wanted to make a few announcements. First of all, we are incredibly grateful to the Alvin L. Gottlieb Foundation and the Missouri Department of Conservation for their generous sponsorship of this webinar series. And we're also so grateful to you, our wonderful viewers, for your support of our programs and webinars. It wouldn't be possible without your support, so thank you. This webinar will be recorded and up on the Deep Roots website by Monday. So you'll also receive an email from me with the link to the recording and any resources that are mentioned during the broadcast. So watch your email and our website. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll be notified each time we upload a video. So on this beautiful September day, we find ourselves roaming a remnant prairie, a prairie that has, for the most part, remained undisturbed by settlement. Remnants cannot be duplicated, but they can be stewarded and cared for. Today's prairie is in excellent hands by its stewards, and we get to experience flora and fauna that can't be found in most places. And this one is in the Kansas City area as well. And I'm happy to report that this time we can hear Larry. So applause for that. I know we had some mic issues last time, and a lot of folks weren't able to hear everything Larry said, and we apologize for that, but we fixed that for this episode, and we are so thankful that every bit of wisdom that Larry has to offer is going to be available to you today. So during the program, if you have questions, please note those in the Q&A tool on Zoom, and we will get to as many of those as we can. We'll be using the chat feature to send you links and references mentioned during the webinar. Unless, of course, I get distracted like I did last time and get kind of enthralled in the video. With that, I am honored to introduce our speakers today. Bob and Jane are our gracious hosts and stewards of this amazing remnant prairie. They have loved on this land for years and have worked with Larry on its management. Larry Rizzo is a retired biologist for the Missouri Department of Conservation, co-founder of Kansas City Wildlands, and a biologist with Habitat Architects. His expertise and knowledge within the realm of native prairie installation, maintenance, and various other biotic factors are limitless. So with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage, and by that I mean the video, Jane, Bob, Larry, and Stacia.
I'm Stacia Stelk. I'm the Executive Director of Deep Roots, and we are out here for Out on the Prairie with Larry Part 2. Last month we went to a reconstructed prairie with at Tim and Susan Rogers, and today we are out on the prairie with Jane and Bob, and we're going to be talking about remnant prairies. Before we go out, I want to talk a little bit about equipment and how we keep ourselves from getting bit up by chiggers and ticks and all those fun things. So you spend a lot of time out in nature, so how do you protect yourself, Larry?
I do. I'm very religious about it too. Ticks are a real serious threat, and people need to take very seriously. There's so many tick-borne diseases out there. And, people have heard of Lyme disease or Rocky Mountain spotted fever, but there's any number of others that most people, and unfortunately a lot of doctors, have never heard of. So it's something you need to protect yourself from. The effects of tick-borne diseases can last the rest of your lifetime and affect your immune system. You need to use a spray that's got permethrin in it, not DEET for ticks. DEET, I think, will give you some protection, but the permethrin works, and that's the spray that you only apply to your clothing. which
Okay.
is actually something else I sort of like about it, the fact that you don't put it directly on your skin. And I will take my pants and the socks I know I'm going to wear out to the driveway, spray them down good, let them dry overnight at least, and you're good for a couple of weeks usually is kind of my limit to that. But permethrin is the ingredient you want. Weird thing being when it's chigger season, which is kind of May till hard frost, I've gotten chewed up with chiggers using the permethrin. It works on ticks, but not chiggers who are fairly closely related creatures, so that's strange. But for them, you do need the DEET. So, but all I do for that is a little ring around where the top of my sock meets the skin of my ankle on each leg, and I've never gotten chiggers if I do that.
Excellent.
So that's
Excellent.
my precautions.
Excellent. And I noticed you're wearing wellies.
Yep, we do. We wear the boots, and I use the permethrin too, Larry, religiously when the ticks are out. But we try to keep chemical low, so we take some risks for sure. But the thing we add is chigger season is talcum powder and sulfur, and you put it in a sock, bang it around your legs. Have you ever done that?
No, I have not. Those boots alone, that height, will give you significant protection from chiggers.
Yeah.
Because they're not just apt to climb up over it. The telltale signs of chiggers are not familiar. You get the bites around your ankles, around the tight spaces, your waist, other places I won't mention. That's chiggers,
Okay.
and they're not fun. Fortunately, they don't spread diseases, but
They're still
no
unpleasant.
fun. Yeah.
So I understand that you and Bob moved in here in 2004. So what's your history with? We can walk and talk if you like. If you want to lead the way. So what's your history with your love of prairies, and what captured you about wanting to move to this particular space?
Gosh, I fell in love with the Flint Hills when I was looking at colleges and went to KSU.
Oh, nice.
Because of the Flint Hills.
Lovely.
So, because they were so beautiful, and I had a horse. So I lived there for years.
Okay.
Bob had a different prairie, love of prairie, probably from hunting and fishing, and so when we chose a place, we didn't even know we could get native prairie because we both work around Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And so we negotiated, loved the land, negotiated, closed. The day we closed, we came out and walked around here, which we hadn't done yet, and went, oh my God.
Ta-da!
If we knew this was here, Bob said, if we knew this was here, we wouldn't have even looked at the house. We just would have bought it.
That's awesome.
So yeah, this is a little jewel in the crown out here.
Excellent.
And we figured it was native because it was just so strangely diverse. I mean, there's a lot of replanted prairie, but you don't get the...
No.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that between reconstructed versus
just a
remnant?
lot of, first just the overall diversity. It exceeds what you could get from a planting, even the best of plantings. And you have a lot of conservative species here, like the lead plant, that is just incredibly thick in here. And when we say conservative species, it's an important term that means plants that are only found in good, high-quality natural communities and can't stand disturbance. It's the opposite of a weed. Weed being many definitions for weed, but from a biological perspective, a weed is a plant that's a generalist that can grow anywhere. And these are the opposite of that.
So does a weed take advantage of like disturbed soil and
Often,
comes in? Okay.
Yes, often, yep. And there's actually a numerical system for ranking plants.
Okay.
Coefficient of conservatism. Plants have a number from 0 to 10. 10 being highly conservative, 0 being usually an invasive exotic or something.
Okay.
So Kansas has a system, Missouri has a system. Many places that was done by staff from the Nature Conservancy or Biological Survey in Kansas probably. But lead plant, for instance, is, I believe, in Missouri, and all my numbers are Missouri from my career, but a lead plant would be an 8.
Okay.
So it's pretty darn high. Basically anything over a 4 or 5 is pretty significant.
Excellent. So as we're walking along, if you see something you want to highlight and talk about a little bit, we're all
Well,
ears.
we got a lot of
And
this
video.
one in bloom right now. This is rosinweed. rosin weed is mid-conservative, about a 5, I believe, or something like that. And we don't discount things like the 5s. They make up the bulk of the diversity in a prairie, oftentimes, things like this. And this is one of the silphiums, the genus in silphium, which is the same as the compass plant we talked about at Tim's place. So it's a different species in that same genus.
So does it also align itself with the
No,
north-south sun?
no,
Or
it doesn't have those big
it's just
leaves
related.
that line themselves up like compass plant, but it's a very common, important prairie plant.
Oh, Bob took like maybe over 100, 150 cedars from the prairie.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Scattered around all over?
They were scattered around all over.
And Larry, did I remember hearing that cedar is not especially well managed with fire, that it has to be physically removed? Or am I
Oh, no,
making
no,
my facts up?
the opposite.
Okay.
With the right fire and the right conditions. Cedars, the number of cedars on our landscape that you see around is evidence of lack of fire on the landscape.
Got it.
I had a counterpart who worked for 20 years or so at Lake of the Ozarks State Park down in Camden County. If you've ever been in that part of the world, it is eaten up with cedars.
It's so sad.
And he researched the history of the park and looked at old General Land Office survey notes from the 1800s. Well, when they're laying out the survey lines, they marked witness trees, and they made note of what tree species were around, and there were no mentions of red cedar.
Really?
Prior to European settlement, cedars would have been found in 2 places, on bluffs and on islands in the Missouri-Mississippi River.
Oh.
2 places where
Fire didn't reach.
Right. So they are one of the best examples you can point to as a native invasive, and particularly for prairies and glades in our fire maintained systems. When you see a ton of them, it's a
So its coefficient's
visual.
pretty low.
I don't know what cedar.
Put you on the spot.
And cedar now it has its place too, and it's a wonderful tree in many ways for wildlife.
Yeah.
In the right place.
Cedar waxwings get their name from it, right?
That's right. Unfortunately, in Southwest Missouri, we refer to places as cedar glades, and that name makes me cringe because cedars are the invaders and they destroy the glade.
Yeah.
They're the oldest tree in Missouri as well. On the bluffs over some of our rivers in the Ozarks, they can be 1,000 years old. But you can find one the same size growing by a roadside that's 40 years old. That's in deep soil, not growing out of a rock.
Interesting.
So this big blue really stopped in about the middle of this prairie. So we love seeing this come on. And Larry, is this little blue?
I cannot. That is not. I don't see it there, but I'm sure you've got a pretty good component of it.
I thought it hadn't quite bloomed yet. There's the lead plant that we're so fond
Yeah,
of.
there's a lot of lead plant out here, probably as much as any prairie I've been on. Interestingly though, the public prairie on Kill Creek Park, I recall, I haven't been there in a while, but I remember it having a lot of lead plant as well. So lead plant must like this part of the world an awful lot.
Yeah, and as you warned us when you chemicaled the blackberry, isn't it the same family as the blackberry?
No,
because a lot of lead
it's
plant got killed.
lead plant's a legume, bean family, so it's not botanically close to the blackberry, but that herbicide will
It knocked it out.
hurt a lot of things. Good thing being you had so much of it, we could afford a little
That's right.
collateral damage there. It's a monarch coming through. They've been really moving the last couple of days. It's
Oh, lovely.
visiting the rosin weed.
Important nectar sources for their
Yeah.
trip south.
Yeah. Here's a late bloomer coming on. This time of year we're getting into Labor Day, and close to Labor Day is really when all the composites or aster family species really take off. The yellows, it's a yellow time of year for flowers. But here's one that's not. This is salvia or blue sage or pitcher sage, it's called, which is one I always like to recommend in prairie plantings. I'm talking about just landscape scale in your yard. This is a good one to include for the fact that it'll give you something blooming late in the year that is not yellow. Not to mention that it's blooming now when the hummingbirds are still around and they will hit this It's a good nectar flower.
Dead
Dead blackberry, yeah.
That was okay. So I didn't realize that blackberries were a problem in prairies. I'd like to know more about that.
Well, when we moved in, there was very little blackberry, and we did not burn for the first, oh gosh, we just burned once in 10 years or maybe 15 years. And it just got away from us. It was in the middle of the prairie, and we oftentimes wouldn't run anything through here when the grasses were tall.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of hard to wade in, and it got away from us. So we've been working with it even before we started working with Larry. We've sprayed at different times. If you look on the internet, there will be people that say, do not spray until, you must spray before June 1st. You must spray the last frost, right before the last frost of the year.
It's almost like casting a spell.
It is, right. And then, don't spray with until 6 months after you've mowed, right?
Right.
So, because then it doesn't have enough leaf on it. So I just don't know is that it's all firmed up yet.
Oh, the information on how to, I've got to confess, when I talked to Jane initially about trying to control this stuff, I had never really tried to get rid of blackberry, and I was kind of a little cautious about it, and I guess my first response was, well, it's native, and it makes me kind of uncomfortable trying to kill it. But when I came out here and saw the extent that it was dominating parts of this prairie, I got it. And but the information on how to control it was kind of all over the map, and we talked to some people I'd certainly consider experts on it, and they kind of had some notions, a few of them, but there just wasn't a lot of firm information about it. What I'm seeing here, this does not say Himalayan blackberry to me. There is an exotic blackberry called Himalayan blackberry that's a nightmare. One of the characters I do remember from it is that when you find a branched stem, the side branches of the Himalayan are particularly long. They'll stick out a foot or more. And I'm not seeing that kind of structure here. Plus, when it grows in thickets, those side branches intertwine, and it just is impenetrable. The thorns are wickeder than than the normal blackberry, which is saying something. But I think this is just our native blackberry. That my hunch is, and I can't say this for sure, but you burn very aggressively here, which is a good thing as far as keeping your woodies under control, and for a lot of other species. But I think it's kind of like that, and may have promoted its spread by rhizomes due to burning.
Just, like this.
Yeah, I'm liking it after the hot hours I put in out here hitting that stuff.
Well, the first 3 years, in fact, before we started working with you, Larry, we tried those different things on the internet, and I think Pasture Guard was kind of the one that everybody used, and I think you used Pasture Guard the first 2 years, and they were still coming back. So
Well, the first time we hit it, though, it was late in the season, and I feared then that it may have already headed into dormancy too far when we were hitting it, so I think that was the problem. So we got it in its prime this year.
And we added, Steve Klubine recommended adding that
Milestone.
Milestone.
Yeah, we added a dash of a secret chemical ingredient to it, which I think helped. Milestone is typically used just on thistles. Teasel is some of its main targets, but I think it helped out with this stuff.
It seemed big to me.
Well, before I quit spraying, the same day I was spraying, you could look at things I'd sprayed in the morning, and they were already turning a funny color. Pasture Guard alone, I've never seen do anything like that, so I have to attribute that to the Milestone. But it seems to have worked. We'll see how it looks next spring. So this is called Eastern Gamma Grass, and it is definitely a nice native prairie species. Tends to like a little damper areas. Has this big seed head that's sort of like big blue stems, this three-parted seed head. And when this stuff goes to seed, the seeds will form these little kernels that are connected. And there are people who think this grass is one of the botanical origins of corn, and it does look similar to grains of corn when it's fully mature. One thing you've got to watch with this stuff is it's got this kind of broad leaf with this white line running down the middle, and it looks a lot like an invasive Johnson grass.
Oh, we sprayed a clump one year
And
thinking it was Johnson.
I know many occasions where people have sprayed it for Johnson grass, so you got to be kind of careful if you know you have both of those two in the same area.
Look at how much it has spread. We had 2 clumps when we moved out here.
And I'm told cattle just love that stuff. It's very palatable. A couple here, mountain mint, which is very common on pretty much every prairie in our region. Will tend to have that. There's one a little more in bloom still. It's kind of going out of bloom, but has that white flower. It's very fragrant. You pick the leaves and crush it. It's got a nice minty smell. And I'm confident it's probably a pretty darn good plant for native bees. And behind it we have rattlesnake master, which we talked about at Tim's place, I recall.
So it blooms white. I mean, it just doesn't really bloom. It looks just like that, but it's white when it first.
It's bloomed out, but when it's in full bloom, it doesn't look a lot different than that. It's an unusual flower. In Missouri, this is a pretty conservative plant. I think rattlesnake master is also an 8 or something like that.
Really?
Yeah. I have a hunch it may be less than that in Kansas.
It seems pretty happy here.
It does.
Yes.
It's interesting, like at first I was wondering, why are there different coefficients for different states? But every ecosystem develops differently.
You got to remember it's an amalgamation of the entire state.
Okay.
And one of our criticisms with the Missouri list was that it was very Ozark-centric, that things were valued a little higher in some cases down there.
And Jane, you mentioned we're sort of in between bloom seasons, right? For your spot.
So it's great for the grasses coming on, but even the grasses, so the big blue, which you can just see whatever's the tallest, almost everything that's the tallest. We usually have some of them get 9 and even 10 feet high.
Rowdy summer, so probably,
Yeah. So it's, it's spectacular. And then the colors that come through, the lavender, the blue, the reds, and everything turns that beautiful.
People don't appreciate that grasses turn color in the fall, and they can be really spectacular.
Yeah.
Little blue stem in particular can be really colorful. Let's go look at this thistle here. I don't know that we talked about thistles at Tim's place.
Ouch. Blackberries.
Oh, nice.
And when we talk about thistles, you have to be careful. It's like talking about Lespedizas. The notorious Sericea lespedeza is the invasive exotic that we want to eradicate in places like this, but there are many nice native Lespedizas that are fine plants. Same goes for thistles. Most people, particularly if you're a farmer, the word thistle is kind of a bad word and you want to get rid of them all, but we have many native ones. And there's a very simple identifying character that'll separate the natives from the exotics. As you turn the leaf over and it's silvery underneath, that's going to be a native thistle. And we don't want to get rid of those. Natives also tend to be less prickly than the exotic ones like bull thistle or musk thistle. And they're extremely important plants out here. First of all, they're excellent nectar plant for butterflies. But we have the goldfinch, which we probably will see while we're out here, may have already. Goldfinches nest later than pretty much any other songbird. They're nesting right now, and they depend on this stuff. Every goldfinch nest will have thistle down in it. So they depend on this material for their nest, and they also eat the seeds from the thistle. The reason goldfinch time their nesting this late, same reason pretty much all birds nest when the greatest amount of food is going to be available to feed their young. And goldfinches are unique to me in that they're a songbird who feeds their young seeds. Most birds, even if they're considered seed eaters, when they're raising young, those young go from this unrecognizable little thing to something that looks just like the adult that can fly in 2 weeks. So they got to eat a lot. So it takes protein. So they're normally going to feed them worms, insects, things like that. So that makes the goldfinch kind of unique, that they raise their young on seeds. And not only the thistle, but a lot of the annual weeds that were blooming earlier in the year, they're producing seed right now. So that's why they time their nesting that late.
So Jane and Bob, do you walk around on your property and kind of just taking the views and the wildlife frequently?
I might have spared that one.
All the time.
It seems like this is kind of a well-worn path. I thought I might ask. I can see why it's just gorgeous.
Well, we just use every inch of this property. We've got trails cut in the woods, which opens the woods up for walking, 3 seasons. I mean, really, it's a winter. It's best in the winter with no ticks. But, we really try to be out here as much as we can.
To mention this, you might think of, and this would help with the spraying, having paths like this to spray off of helps a lot to orient you. It's like, okay, I'm going to work this side here till I, run into the next path over there or whatever. But you might think of mowing, keeping a mowed strip through here during the growing season, maybe 2 of them.
I've always wanted to do that. Bob is just like,
quadrants to work on for spraying and place to walk. And you can not maintain that same, change them up every year.
Yeah.
So that you're not mowing the same spot every year, every couple of years, whatever. And when you burn, you might also try to maybe go with burning half at a time. I know it's more labor intensive, but
we'd love to do that.
We did that once.
We did that once, and I used to ride horses through here and had trails.
All out, except, for a dividing line in the middle.
yeah.
And it was a lot of raking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, time you mow it and get it down.
You need to. Do you have what kind of water unit do you use when you burn here? Do you have?
Well, we actually, the last few times, we have couple 55-gallon tanks that fit on a platform that will go behind the tractor. But Courtney's really gotten us interested in the portables, and then the big tank on the truck.
It would help if you had something that you could lay down a wet line with. That would make your life so much easier when you're burning that. Right? I mean, right before you light, just soak your line.
Oh my gosh, that would make it so much easier.
Yeah, it will. Use blowers when you burn?
We do.
Okay. Blowers, can't use them on the backfire. You can use them on the flank.
Yeah.
Definitely on the head fire, man. It'll save you a lot of work. I've got 2 other species of blazing star, but not that one.
These are this is what was blooming when we
Bumblebee.
first walked around the prairie that first day.
Really?
And we went, wait a minute.
The blazing star? Or the
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have stumbled into a gold mine.
Well, this is one. This and pale purple coneflower, the ones I like to call the prairie poster children. They're very showy plants. You'd expect to find them on any of our prairies around here. But this is tall blazing star, or also called prairie blazing star. Genus Liatris pycnostaceae. Even if you're not familiar with this plant, you've probably seen it somewhere, and it's used in cut flower arrangements a lot. But it blooms in July, so it's already done its thing. It's not gone to seed yet, but it's on its way.
When it's in full bloom, the stems will bend. It'll just look like this purple ballet out here. It's so beautiful.
It's a neat flower. And I always recommend, if you've got a little planting, I'm talking about even a yard size scale one, the rough blazing star is just about to bloom. That's Liatris aspera. And it makes a nice complement to that one, the blooming time. That's the cool thing about the Liatris. There's a number of species, and you can get them from the native nurseries, and they all have different blooming phenology. So you can get 2 or 3 species, and you can keep a blazing star in bloom in your garden for extended period of time.
That's cool.
And aspera blooms when the monarchs are coming through, so they really hit it. Here's another
Like
good
Larry said,
site.
it's so hard to tell the difference between the native and the.
Yeah.
This is dead Sericea lespedeza. Got a little bit of that out here. This little remnant is incredibly free of exotics, to be honest. I mean, it's got a few issues, but they're pretty minor and nothing like you might find on a lot of others. Because when you got a small space, the stuff tends to invade from the edges. And a lot of that depends on who you got next door. This prairie is really pretty darn clean as far as exotics go. We've got a little Japanese honeysuckle, little sweet clover over on the edge here, and a little bit of Sericea. That's
Calorie pear a little.
just a little bit of calorie pear. Yep.
Those things are evil.
Other than
Yeah,
that,
they're so
your invasives are more on the native side here.
That's
The
what's so
dogwoods,
interesting,
the
right?
blackberries,
It's so bizarre to
persimmons,
me.
all that kind of thing.
So is this little fine grass, is that the drop seed?
It sure looks like it. Yeah, I would say that's probably prairie drop seed.
It's
Which
pretty.
has this really
So
nice
pretty,
form
isn't
to
it?
it.
So delicate.
Great in landscaping, you know, has that kind of fountain effect in landscaping. It turns a nice color in the fall too.
Does it have a little seed head where the seeds fall down this way?
The seed head will stand up. It'll look a little bit like the switchgrass, kind of spread out, and it smells like soap when it's in blooming. If you got a big patch of this in a landscape planting, I mean, you can walk by it when it's blooming and you can notice it. I'm still hunting for that purple prairie clover because the seed ought to be ready right now. They had the most beautiful purple prairie clover out here I've ever seen anywhere. I mean, it was just such a vivid, bright purple like I've never seen. I mean, it just stopped me when I came across a couple of them out here, and they were huge too. The flowering heads on them were huge. That's why I'm carrying that container. Put in my little prairie.
For our viewers at home, Larry brought along an old-fashioned film canister to collect seeds along the way. So we're on a quest while we're out here.
This is
Ouch.
one of the, they're called tick trefoils, genus Desmodium. And to most of us, these are kind of annoying because I'm not seeing the little, they make the little flat seeds that stick to us. Anybody got
Oh,
any
is
yet?
that what that is?
Yeah.
Triangle ones?
But those seeds, first of all, are good wildlife food. Here's one here. So that's a green one. They'll turn brown later, but
Oh, that's not
we
all.
used to make jokes, me and my counterparts when I was a natural history biologist, that we could tell who has spent more time in the field by how many of those were stuck in their car or their truck.
It's like a
Seeds.
productivity test.
Yes. But
I always
this
wondered
is a
where those
good one
came
here,
from.
and this is pretty conservative. Desmodiums kind of run the gamut on the conservatism scale. In Missouri, I believe this one is a 7 or 8, and this one's, they can be really tricky to identify the different species, but this one's easy. So this is Desmodium sessilifolium, and botanical term called sessile means that there's no stalk on the leaves. It's just flush with the stem, and that's what you see here, and that's where that name comes from. So this is one of the Desmodiums that's easy to ID. Plus it gets tall, which can make it kind of extra annoying because the seeds don't just stick to the bottom of your pants. They get you way up here in your hair or whatever.
So if they don't burn next year, or burn, what would they do instead?
Nothing.
Just let it lay
Yeah,
fallow?
no, this has had enough disturbance, enough fire that it can rest a year. But in the big picture, you can substitute haying or mowing for burning some years. That's not a bad strategy, and oftentimes that's just something simpler for landowners to do than to pull off a burn if people aren't comfortable doing burns. So you can substitute a mowing. You could have a 5-year cycle where you did 2 burns and a mow and a couple years of rest in there, something like that.
When would you mow so that you wouldn't be...
Well, you're going to hurt something. I mean, you're going to take out something during its life cycle, but you definitely wait till after mid-July because that's considered a safe time for nesting birds. So you do it probably August. You know, anytime late July to first part of September. Now, keep
You
in
lose some of your
mind,
blooms that way, don't you?
you lose some.
And the grasses will come back, but and we do have a lot of rosin weed.
And again, that's an idea for breaking it up into quadrants and maybe not mowing all of it. You know, maybe you mow what hasn't been burned in a while or something like that. You vary your timing is a thing. So that will give you different structure on one side of the prairie than another, so it's not all in the same structural condition. You'll favor some plants, you'll hurt some, but that's good in the big picture. Give you a little more diversity. So I don't think you'd mind the results. You would, you know, right after you mow, you know, it wouldn't look so nice to you, but you give it a little time. You got to keep in mind.
Tears is what I'm picturing. Tears and Kleenex.
Virtually every privately owned prairie in Missouri is hayed. That's why they're there. They're hay prairies. That's what the landowner does with them, and so they get mowed every year.
But that's for grasses, isn't it? Just grasses?
Well, I mean, they use all of the hay, but it's tremendous for spring bloomers. You go out on those prairies in April and May, and they're gorgeous. They're full of Indian paintbrush and phlox and lousewort and all those early spring stuff, prairie violets, things like that, because those things are having their competition removed late in the growing season, and the vegetation's still short come spring, so they love it. So it benefits that sweet, and that's fine, but and you go to those prairies and they're beautiful then, but their overall diversity it's not great for, because you're always favoring particular suite of plants, and there's another suite that you're whapping right in the middle of their growing season. So you vary it, but an occasional mowing would not hurt at all, and it's keeping your woodies in check. That's one thing you can say for hay prairies. They don't have woody problems. They got woodies on them, but they're this big. So.
When do you typically burn?
December, January we try, but sometimes it leaks a little later into, I think you want to do it by March. And sometimes we're in first week of March, it just depends on
That's what I've come around
how
to.
organized we are.
There's been some research showing that March was a time of year when Department of Conservation, a lot of public prairies got burned in March historically. And what they've seen is there's a very subtle suite of plants out here that are native cool season grasses, and I'm terrible at picking them out or identifying them. But there's native fescues, for instance, that are very beneficial little prairie plants, and that March burn timing is wiped them out of a lot of our prairies or made them decline. And plants are coming out of dormancy, even though they may not look like it to the eye. So I think it's best to get your burning in before March, unless you have a specific objective, like to promote grasses somewhere. Then you'd want to back off and burn in April, like they do out in the Flint Hills, where that's pretty much all they care about. Oh, it's blooming. It's just lopped over. Yeah.
Yikes.
Oh, there it is. Wonderful.
So there's compass plant. That's the cousin of the silphium, same genus, or the rosinweed, I mean, silphium genus. And that's one we discussed, that genus silphium is unique in the aster family because it is the ray flowers here that are the fertile ones that produce seeds, and the disc flowers in the center. You get a good look at those right now. They're in full bloom. Those disc flowers in the center are sterile. And it's usually just the opposite.
There's some over there too.
We got
Let
purple
me see if
berry
I can
glow
just-
there.
Yay.
How are you feeling about blackberries by now?
Right? Yeah. I'm starting to form
Rather-
some very strong feelings about
I'd rather
blackberries.
eat them than walk through them.
So I think Larry found a spot. So Larry, what are you going to do with those seeds?
Put them in my
Oh wait,
garden at
just
home.
be careful with that. I want you to be a little bit conservative because that's the only plant I found.
Oh, you've got more than that.
Okay.
There's more than one
Well,
location.
since it's you. Okay.
There's not a lot, but there's more than one.
So any special treatment for those seeds, or can you just plant them in the spring?
There, you probably should. I'll probably just scatter them right away. But it's a legume. Most legumes can benefit from some sort of treatment because they tend to have that harder seed coat. This is to be blooming soon. This is willow-leafed aster. Some are better than others, but pretty much all the asters are nice bee plants. Willow-leafed aster has these venation in the leaf that's, I don't think you're going to be able to pick it up on the camera, but it's spider webby, which kind of goes in all directions if you look at it closely. And that's a pretty, in Missouri, that's got a good number. That's like 7, I believe.
Jane,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you know a little bit about the history of this space and how it managed to retain its magic.
You know, what we knew about it, what we know about it was there was a guy who still had some equipment on the land, and his grandfather had farmed this land. Mm-hmm. So when he came out to pick up his equipment, we peppered him with questions about the prairie, and he said as long as he knew his grandfather kept cattle.
Really?
So maybe the grandmother thought it was too pretty to mow.
I like it.
You were saying.
Right.
Or you cut hay off of it for them.
Yeah. So but we didn't ever see any sign of cattle. There weren't wallows or I don't know. And
Pretty
I don't know
darn diverse to have been grazed.
Yeah, I know.
For a long time. I mean, you can't park cattle on a prairie and graze a small one, particularly. Flint Hills landscape. Yeah, well, even there it's not great for diversity, but you couldn't put cattle on a small acreage and just let them continuously graze a prairie. Sooner or later they wear it out. The prairie plants don't have enough energy in their root systems to come back. That's happened to a lot of prairies. We've got grazed like that, and eventually they would have got overseeded with non-native grasses and or would be not recognizable as prairie anymore. So it certainly could have been grazed, but it wasn't grazed hard for a long time, continuously, that's for sure.
And plowing is the thing that would ruin a remnant. Is
Plowing,
that right?
it's done.
Okay.
I mean, it's done as a prairie when you break up, because so much of the prairie is under our feet here. We're seeing what's above ground, but there's so much of it below ground, and have all those relationships with soil microbes and fungus that we know. So.
Oh, that's cool. What is that? Probably nothing important.
That is, I believe that's going to be, wingstem, verbicina. One of those cool late season asters. It's kind of a woodland or wet swale family, aster family, composite. Cool thing about this one, this genus, and I'm pretty sure there's only one other that makes the frost flowers. Have you ever seen frost flowers?
Oh, really? We're going to come invade sometime like December, January, so we can capture frost flowers on your property.
The best display I ever saw was at the Discovery Center.
Really?
On this plant. They were huge one year. They occur when the plant goes dormant, but it's still got an active root system. And so the plant will be dying back. There'll be like little cracks in the stem that you can't see. And you get the right moisture conditions, the root system's still active and it's pulling up moisture from the soil. And the right temperature and conditions, that moisture is oozing out of those cracks and it's freezing when it comes out. It makes, do you remember old-fashioned ribbon candy?
Yeah.
It looks like that. Wow. But it makes all these really cool shapes. I've seen little heart-shaped ones and really neat.
And it's almost like a gift because the conditions have to be just right and you just happen to be seeing them.
And usually they're gone in a matter of hours. The sun comes out and by 10, 11 o'clock they've melted away. That's another difference. Once at the Discovery Center, were thick. I mean, you could have cooled a drink with them. I'm not exaggerating. And they lasted all day and maybe multiple days. I've never seen that before.
Oh, that's fun.
But there's a little mint called Dittany which doesn't grow around here, I don't believe. It's Ozarkian. It also makes them.
On that note, I want to thank you very much for inviting us to your space and sharing your space with us, and thank you for taking us and showing all the, even in between bloom seasons, there are really lovely things to see
Absolutely.
out on the prairie.
Thanks.
So.
Well, that was phenomenal. Thank you to Jane and Bob and Larry and Stacia. Now we can get to some questions, your questions and answers. Jane, you're welcome to come to this stage as well. Some of these questions might be for you. Welcome, and thank you both for that phenomenal tour. That you know so much about every aspect of your prairie, Jane, is I don't know, we know that you have such a relationship with it. So that's amazing. Larry, I'm gonna share my screen. Well, once I find it, I'm gonna share my screen of a frost flower. I think many of us have not seen a frost flower in real life. I'm gonna pull up a picture. So can everyone see that? That's that. Can you see that, Larry and Jane,
Yes.
that ribbon? When you describe that ribbon, Candy, that's perfect.
It's gorgeous.
Just the way it's done is amazing to me.
Wow.
All right, we do have some questions in the Q&A. Lots of good questions always. Yeah, this is a good one, and I actually had written this down. We'll provide this in the resources, but Julie asks, at the beginning of the video, a numbering system was mentioned with certain numbers applied to specific plants. Could someone please explain again what that system is and what the numbering systems mean?
Yes. The numbering system is called the coefficient of conservatism. And again, every plant in the state of Missouri, I'm certain Kansas has a system like that as well. I'm guessing most states do. Generally, the ranking was in Missouri. It was developed by the Nature Conservancy. Doug Ladd specifically was the main driver behind it. In Kansas, I suspect it's done by the Kansas Biological Survey folks. But anyway, it's a 0 to 10 scale. Each plant is assigned a numerical value, and conservatism refers to the plant's ability to withstand disturbance. So a 10 is highly conservative. It's a plant you're only going to find in high quality natural communities, cannot tolerate a lot of disturbance, versus 0 or a 1, which is a generalist species, could be even an invasive exotic, but definitely a weedy type species that can grow about anywhere. So that's the difference in them. And not to be, don't get into thinking that the plant has to be a 9 or 10 to be significant. Those mid-range things, 4s, 5s, 6s can be pretty dang significant plants out there. So, but it's just an interesting metric. And of course there's subjectivity in it, but it's just an interesting metric to judge the quality of a natural community.
Outstanding. And we will send that just for our audience to know. We will find links to those for Kansas and Missouri and any others, and we'll send those out in the resources too, because that's tremendous to just kind of understand the makeup of your prairie. And if you can make changes if you feel like you need to add different plants.
As a biologist, the usefulness of it is in part because you can visit a site that's in poor shape, hasn't been managed, maybe it's overrun with exotics, but you might find a handful of highly conservative things in there. And that's your clue that it's probably a restorable community, even if it's visually in pretty bad shape at the time.
So that brings a question to my mind. Have you encountered a non-restorable community? And what would that look like?
Well, we've got lots of that in and around an urban area. You know, I mean, we have many acres that virtually anywhere in the state that have been just so disturbed by human activity that there's no native plant community to restore there.
Oh, okay.
So
you could start over, but
yes,
okay.
I bet you're never going to replace it with the diversity that would have been there originally.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
But Larry, I just learned about this in the last year and was excited about it, about the rhizomes living for 80 years, even in the tilled dirt. So, and as you and I talked about it, the grasses will come back, but the flowers won't. Is that right? If the grasses are given a chance to, within the 80 years of tilling, if they're given a chance, the actual native rhizomes can come back into play?
It's more common that grasses, the native grasses, will survive sites like that occasionally, and you'll see evidence of that versus the flowers. You might get some non-conservative stuff growing in there, and of course there's always the potential, depending on what it is, for plants to recolonize areas if there's a seed source close by. You know, if it's a wind deposited seed like a milkweed or a blazing star, something can move into it. But yeah, those continuous plowing, of course, nothing's going to survive something like that. But I've seen sites, prairies, where perhaps someone attempted to farm it maybe 1 year, plowed it, determined it wasn't worthwhile financially, whatever, ran into too many rocks when they were plowing it and quit. And the prairies can bounce back in that situation pretty well. It's just the length of disturbance and the intensity of it that determines what's going to be able to hang on or not.
That must have been what happened in our south field, because we're having a little bit of life coming back to it. But I bet they just tilled it once or twice. That makes sense.
It's the unknown thing when you're judging, restorability or looking at a site today, what you got on the ground, and trying to figure out what its potential could be. If we all knew the history of that land, what had been done to it, that would certainly be very useful, but we seldom have that kind of information unless you're really lucky.
John asks, and this is a pretty practical question, is Sawyer a brand of permethrin you would recommend?
Yes. I mean, any of them are good if it's got permethrin in the ingredients, but I've used that particular one myself. So yeah.
That we used to, yeah.
All right. I'm going to check the Q&A here, or the chat, real quick, to see if we're missing anyone. Any questions? Miller, our intern, actually left a few. And one of the questions I think is really pertinent. Have you done anything with that purple prairie clover that you took? Because Jane wants to make sure that you use it wisely. Jane is so soft-spoken until you're taking her purple prairie clover seeds, and then we can hear Jane. I don't believe you, Jane. It's your baby.
It is on the ground in my prairie garden as we speak.
Okay. It's made it to a good home.
It was when I arrived home that day.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
All right. So it was quickly and efficiently placed in the right hands. Val asks, I have read that 1/3 of the roots of native plants die off each year, which would automatically add organic matter and help with moisture retention. Does this drought year see on your prairie? I think she's asking, is this drought year affecting your prairie and what can we expect from that?
Well, any type of event like this, there are kind of winners and losers oftentimes. Prairies survive droughts extremely well. I remember being out on a number of prairies in 2012, and it was a much more extreme drought year than anything we've experienced this year. And I was amazed just how healthy the prairies look. The grasses, if I'm recalling right, in some places were a little subdued. The height of some of the plants you could tell wasn't maybe what they would have been. But there was an abundance of flowering, and you have to keep in mind that maybe playing a role there that plants, when they're a little bit stressed, often flower really well. I mean, it's a reaction to the stress that they're reproducing. So it visually didn't hurt the prairie at all. And of course, they're used to it. They've coexisted with us kind of climatic conditions for a long time, so they can handle drought. Plus, it will actually, it's beneficial in a way, because we're at this place, particularly in Missouri and the eastern side of Kansas, where the annual rainfall is kind of right in the between the, are we grassland or are we a forested or wooded area ecosystem around here? And we're right in the middle of that. So when you get droughty years, it favors the grasses and grasslands more, and the wetter years promotes the woodies more. So, and we've had a lot of cool, wet summers here in the past decade, really. So having a little droughty year is not a bad thing for a prairie at all.
I think it's knocking the brome back a little bit, the cool season grass.
Could well be, yeah.
Yeah, that is all we have. Oh, have you found any orchids? That's going to be our last question. Any native orchids out there?
I have, when I've been there in July, I found one of the ladies' tress orchids out there. It's called Spiranthes, is a genus for all those orchids, Spiranthes vernalis, and it's unique among all those ladies' tresses in that it blooms early for ladies' tress in July, and it gets quite tall. And I've seen that one out there. I suspect there are others out there, but they tend to show up in bigger numbers in wetter years. So this wouldn't have been probably a good year to spot them.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Jane, for sharing your space and your expertise and your love of your space. And Larry, thank you again for walking us through and helping us experience these prairies that are such treasures. There are so few of them, and it's wonderful, and it's wonderful to see that they're in good hands and they're being stewarded from people who love them. So thank you both. I'm going to go ahead and kind of close us out for the day. So thanks both of you, and we will catch you later. I would love to just thank you to all of our audience for the great questions, for supporting us, and for learning more about native plants. And before we go, we want to give away a prize. See if I'm sharing my screen yet. Let me share my screen. I am. Good. We want to share a prize. And here is the quiz question. This is going to be from the opening credits. Where is the opening kickoff event for Planet Native happening this year? So put your answer in the chat. We want to make sure that we give everyone a chance to win. And while your answers are piling in, we'd like to remind you about Planet Native. We are thrilled to present Planet Native this year. It's happening the week of September 12th through the 16th. So we are less than 2 weeks away from this conference. We are so excited to bring you the most comprehensive native landscape conference to date. We have it all. We feel like we have it all this year. We have an in-person fellowship with colleagues, beginners, experts. We'll have food, beverages, lively conversation. We have field trips that are quickly filling up. And we have 3 half days that are packed with concurrent sessions. It's going to be spectacular, and we would love to have you join us. I'll give you a little sneak peek. This is not the specific bag, but this kind of large canvas tote bag will be given away at the Boulevard event, our kickoff event. And each of our exhibitors will have these native flora and fauna pins. So as you go around visiting our exhibitors, you can collect those pins, and we call it flair, and kind of flair yourself for the night. So we'd love to have you there. We'd love to see you in person, and we can learn so much from each other. So please join, register today. Native Plants at Noon is usually the third Thursday of every month, but we will be at the Anita B. Gorman Center next week for Native Plants at Noon. So please note that. And all of our Deep Roots events are on our website at www.deeproots.org/events. While you're on there, if you would consider making a donation, we would so appreciate it. So let's see who won. Dawn Olney won the native plant cards. So it's a gift pack of 8 native plant cards by Kansas City-based artist Nancy Waugh. So Dawn Olney, if you would send me an email, Tammy, Tammy, at deeprootskc.org, we'd love to know where to send you that prize. So thank you for joining us today. We will see you next week for Native Plants at Noon. And we want to thank Larry and Jane today for all that they shared. Thank you. Take care and have a great day.
Okay.